Hey everybody, Charles for HumbleMechanic.com, back today to talk about more failed Volkswagen parts. Today we're going to be looking at CV boots. Funny enough, this is actually the 16th video that I've done talking about different parts and how they fail. So if you've ever wondered how a certain part failed, check out the playlist Failed VW Parts on YouTube, and there's always a link to the playlist at the bottom of the blog post and at the bottom of the description on the YouTube channel. All right, before we get into the show, we need to talk about the sponsor of the day, which is DeutschAutoparts.com. These guys are the Volkswagen Audi parts experts. They got a ton of great DIY videos, awesome service, amazing prices. Check them out, DeutschAutoparts.com. I actually had to call Paul from Deutsch Auto Parts and get the right part number for my car when I found out that I had a broken CV boot, and the parts department had already left for the day. So personal shout out to those guys. Thanks for bailing me out on that one, Paul. I really appreciate it. All right, so what the heck is a CV boot? Well, this is a constant velocity joint. This is actually the piece that connects the transmission, which would be on this side, to the wheels. And the boot is what's responsible for keeping all that grease inside of the joint. The joint is made up of several ball bearings inside a cage, and that allows the joint, especially the outer one, to rotate with travel of the vehicle, as well as turn left and right as the wheel turns, and as well as articulate up and down when the car goes over bumps. So the outer joint needs to be able to do all that, and something has to keep the grease in, and that's the CV boot. It's an accordion style boot, again, that allows for all that movement in the joint, and it's sealed by two clamps, one on the outer end and one on the inner end. It's a pretty simple setup for something that has to do so much and is actually a very important part of the vehicle's powertrain. So how does it fail? Well, basically it splits open. Now, depending on what kind of CV boot and what generation car we're talking about, they really only fail two different ways on Volkswagens. One, it'll split inside the accordion, and that's typically the boot that's a more soft rubbery feel. The newer boots are actually a bit harder, almost like a plastic, and they tend to split right around the inner clamp here. Now, I've actually seen a few random ones that the clamps have slid off and it basically leaks grease out of the boot. But that's pretty rare. For the most part, you're gonna find that they're either split inside the accordion or right at the end where the clamp is. And on something on the bottom of the vehicle, there's always opportunity for impact damage, but that's really, really rare too. So how do we know we have a CV boot that's broken? Well, odds are you're gonna find it during a visual inspection. Whether that's like what happened to me when I'm putting my car up in the air to change the oil and I see the entire wheel covered in grease, or maybe the fender liner covered in grease, or simply just noticing that there's a little bit of grease around the axle itself. It really all depends on where the boot splits. On my B5.5 Passat, it's really common for that to split inside the accordion. On the newer generations, Mark V and up, B6 and up, they tend to split more around the clamp. The ones that break inside the accordion are the ones you really need to catch quick because that'll sling most of the grease out really fast. The ones split near the clamp, they tend to hold the grease in, but it's still a problem because it can let moisture and debris inside of that joint. And as moisture and debris accumulate inside that, it actually gets in the grease and can cause damage to the bearings. If it goes on for too long, it can actually cause damage to the axle joint itself. And you might notice that by the vehicle clicking when you turn either left or right. So a visual inspection is going to be the easiest way to find out whether you have a broken CV boot or not. Now, there can be a little bit of diagnosis involved in this. Again, it's mostly a visual inspection, but if you do have a split boot, you want to make sure that there's no damage to the axle. And checking a CV boot dynamically is kind of like checking a wheel bearing. You want to rotate the wheel all the way and load up the opposite side. So if you're trying to check the left boot, you're going to rotate the wheel to the right and accelerate. I like to do it from a stop, and if there's damage to the axle, you'll hear a series of clicks. If you rotate the wheel the other way to the left, now you're loading up the right side, and you'll hear a series of clicks coming from the other axle. Now that's like a 95% diagnostic test. There may be times where you have clicking from the same side, from the same direction that you're turning, or maybe both, just something to be aware of. But almost all the time, if you rotate the wheel, you're checking the opposite side because that's the side that you're loading. When might we expect to see these boots fail? Well, you really never know. It can happen as low as 20,000 miles on a car, all the way up. I find that on my car, I seem to wind up replacing the CV boots about every 40 to 50,000 miles. Luckily, to check it is really easy, and all that is involved is just taking a look. So, is it a DIY? Well, it can be a pretty easy DIY or it can be a really tricky DIY. It really depends on what kind of vehicle we're talking about. On my Passat, it's a pretty easy DIY. There may be some special tools that you need, but it really, again, all depends. This axle that I have here actually snaps into the transmission with a clip, and that's what holds it in. On my Passat, it's bolted in onto the transmission side. You'll also need some sort of socket to remove the outer bolt. Some of the axles you also need to press out of the knuckle. It really all depends on the application, but you will need something to tighten the clamps on the boots. I actually did a review of a really great clamp tool. I'll put a link in the show notes. It's made by OTC. Awesome, 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 especially for the newer, harder plastic ones where the clamps are really heavy duty. So this one could be a pretty easy DIY, but it does require a few tools specifically for doing this job, as well as maybe some odd fasteners like a triple square. You'll want to check your application depending on what kind of vehicle you have. A couple of quick notes too. This is actually really common on not only Volkswagens, but a lot of passenger cars. It's almost to the point on VWs where it's kind of considered maintenance. At least that's how I look at it on my car. If you are getting any clicking in the joint, you want to go ahead and replace either the joint or the entire axle. You really need to analyze how much all that's going to cost and make the best financial decision. It is a lot cheaper to do the boot than to replace the axle, so if you can catch it early enough, that's definitely your best bet. There's a bunch of other ways that joints can fail and axles can fail. Inner joints can fail and cause a vibration on D-cell or X-cell. You can get weird play inside any of the joints. You can get an out of balance axle. It really all depends. We're mostly talking about just the boot itself today. If you are going to DIY this, make sure you clean the joint really well and get good fresh grease inside of there so that there's no risk of having contaminated grease. Also, make sure you have the VIN to your vehicle and make sure you get the right boot for your car. All right guys, I'm gonna wrap it up there. If you have any questions or comments, post it in the comments section below. Hey, if you liked the video, throw it a thumbs up on YouTube. I always appreciate that. You can also subscribe on YouTube or on the blog at humblemechanic.com. You can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the blog, humblemechanic.com, and obviously on YouTube. All right guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.